Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Self-Assessment of Communication, or SAC. So for some background information about the SAC, it was developed by Ronald Show and Michael Nearbonne in 1982 at the Idaho State University. There are two versions of this questionnaire. The other version is the Significant Other Assessment of Communication, or SOAC. These two questionnaires are identical. The only difference is the pronouns that are being used in each question, but the questions themselves remain the same across both questionnaires. A study by Beverly Short on 50 adults with an age range of 20 to 80 years of age, and including hearing and hearing impaired individuals, did find a high test-retest reliability for both these questionnaires, with an R value of about 0.8 and 0.9 respectively. So the questionnaires themselves both consist of about 10 questions, and a patient's going to assign a score of 1 to 5 for each question. Questions 1 through 6 assess the patient's communication difficulties in various situations. Questions 7 and 8 examine the client's general feelings about his or her hearing handicap. And then 9 and 10 assess the individual's perception of the attitudes of others towards his or her hearing abilities. As far as the scoring for these questionnaires goes, I have an example of how the score is calculated at the bottom. As you can see, you take the raw score and multiply it by 2, subtract 20 from that, and then multiply it by 1.25, and that will give you a percentage score. That percentage score is translated like this. 0 to 20% is no disability or handicap is present. 21 to 40% indicates a slight disability or handicap. 41 to 70% indicates a mild to moderate disability or handicap. And then 71 to 100% indicates a severe hearing disability or handicap. This is a slightly more modern version of the self-assessment of communication. You can tell by looking down at the bottom that there's no question 10. There are different versions of this that I've seen. The initial version, like I said previously, included 10 questions. There have been updates that have then removed that 10th question, slightly reworded some of the questions. I think question 6 in particular has been reworded once or twice. And then there are also people who have been using this to see how they're doing while wearing hearing aids and also while not wearing hearing aids. It was initially intended to only be answered by individuals when they were not wearing hearing aids, but some people have been starting to develop it as a bit more of a comparison tool. So you can see that the questions themselves are asking things such as, number 1, do you experience communication difficulties in situations when speaking with one other person, such as at home, at work, etc.? Do you experience difficulty while watching TV? Question 7 is asking, do you feel that any other problem or difficulty with your hearing worries, annoys, or upsets you? And question 9 is asking, how often does hearing loss negatively affect your enjoyment of life? So they are pretty broad questions, and a patient gets a pretty broad way to answer that, as we can see, with the almost never, occasionally, about half the time, frequently, and practically always answering options. So personally, I like that because it gives a patient a bit more flexibility and accuracy to how they want to answer a question versus some other questionnaires that only allow a patient to say no, sometimes, or yes. If we actually move on to my exact kind of thoughts about the SAC and the SOAC, the first thing I do really like is that it's really short to administer. Both questionnaires would only take about 5 to 10 minutes to answer. So this is something that we could use either during a hearing evaluation appointment or even before a hearing evaluation appointment to kind of inform us on how a patient thinks their hearing loss is impacting their life. Additionally, I like the fact that there is a significant other version, because that can then come into play a little bit as a counseling tool. If, for example, we have a patient who is showing a lot of denial about the severity of their hearing loss, we could use the answers on the significant other version to maybe help them see that their hearing loss to them may not be very impactful, but it is impacting the other people in their life. And so maybe we can then use that as a way to kind of help them realize that there is a bit of more handicap present than they might initially want to admit. I do also really like that it has a high test-retest reliability, simply because we know that the answers we're getting on this are going to be accurate and repeatable over time, and that's really what we want out of a questionnaire, is knowing that it's going to give us an accurate gauge of how the patient is functioning. Finally, I do really like that there are some versions that do allow us to compare between how a patient is functioning without hearing aids and when they are wearing hearing aids. I like that because it can kind of help us in certain counseling situations to help a patient show that they are actually doing better with hearing aids. Maybe they are feeling reluctant and not super sure if they are enjoying the experience, but we can use that information to show them that, hey, look, you are actually um, telling us that you're doing better when you're wearing your hearing aids. So in general, I guess broad overview, I like the fact that it's quick. I will say the fact that it is only 10 questions and the questions as specific as they are don't necessarily give us a lot of fine detail about how a patient is struggling and where they are struggling. Does mean that its uses are somewhat limited, but overall, as a kind of quick look into how a patient thinks that they are impacted by their hearing loss, how their significant other might be thinking that they're impacted, and also how they're doing both pre and post fitting, does make this a really useful tool to consider when it comes to counseling patients. So this is my reference page, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know.